Okay, this video is called How to Increase Testosterone. Recently, I was talking to this lady doctor on the phone. She says, Pete, my son is all worried that his testosterone's not high enough and he thinks that men are being feminized. Is there anything he can do? And I go, yeah, there's a whole bunch of things you can do. I've made a lot of videos in the past where I go into a lot of detail about all the chemistry of estrogen. And because a big part of raising your testosterone is avoiding estrogen, it counteracts the effects of testosterone to some extent. So you want to minimize your estrogen exposure as a man. Okay, so here's cholesterol. It's the backbone of the steroid hormones. Estrogen is a steroid hormone, so these are lipids. There's 4 rings, A, B, C, and D. And the unique thing about estrogen is that there's a hydroxyl group coming off the A ring, and also that the A ring has 3 double bonds, so it's an aromatic ring, meaning it's like a benzene. So that's the key thing. And this combination of a hydroxyl group and a benzene ring is called a phenol. And that is the absolute key thing to know about estrogen. Anything that has a phenol on it, it's probably going to be estrogenic. Okay, and if you hear the word benzyl in the name, then it's probably estrogenic. If you hear benzyl or phenol in there, it's probably estrogenic. So this is the estrogen receptor on a cell. All right, and so here would be an estrogen molecule. Here's the benzene ring, here's the hydroxyl group, and then the hydrogen will be shared between a hydroxyl group coming off the side chain of an amino acid in the protein receptor, the estrogen receptor. Hormone receptors on cells are proteins, okay? So it'll have a hydroxyl group, and then this hydrogen will be shared, and this will activate the estrogen receptor, and then it'll exert estrogenic effects, okay? So here's a typical example of a preservative, a para-benzoic acid. So you got a benzoic acid, meaning that this is like a benzene ring, and then it's a carboxylic acid on there together. We'll call that a benzoic acid, like a benzoate. And then this is the para position, directly opposite of that, okay? So you don't need to know the chemistry of it. You just need to know parabens, which you'll hear a lot about them as being preservatives in personal care products like deodorants. You don't need deodorant, by the way. When you walk in a room, you say, hey, how you doing? You don't sniff each other's armpits, okay? If you're sniffing each other's armpits, it means you already like each other. So, wearing that deodorant is like a low IQ thing to do. It's conformist, stupidity. And a lot of women in particular, they'll shave their armpit, and then they rub this lipid on their deodorant, with these parabenzoic acid lipids, plus aluminum is a metalloestrogen, and it gets shared right when they're lymphatics to the upper outer quadrant of the breast, okay? Stupid. Estrogenic chemicals cause proliferation of breast cells, increase your risk of breast cancer, upper outer quadrant. Breast cancer used to be about 25% in the upper outer quadrant. Now it's like 60%, and it's thought that deodorant's the main reason for that. So forget the deodorant, save money, minimize all these things. And then you don't want to be, drinking water out of plastic bottles. You don't want to buy plastic bottled water, and you don't want to carry your water around in a plastic bottle if you carry your water around. Here's bisphenol A, BPA. Bis means two of something that are in separate spots. So here's a phenol group here, here's a phenol group there. So there's two phenol groups, and then there's just, some variable carbons in the middle. And the point I'm saying is you'll see all these packages say BPA free, BPA free. That really doesn't mean anything, because the companies can just put in something like BPS with a sulfate group in there, and it'll still have the phenols, so it'll still be estrogenically active. So you want glass. Real glass is not estrogenic, so you'd want glass, not one of these BPA equivalent things. The other thing is you want to eat a plant-based, high-fiber diet, because the plants provide dietary fiber that give you good gut bacteria. If you don't have adequate dietary fiber, you get bad gut bacteria. And the bad gut bacteria have an enzyme on them called glucuronidase. And the relevance is that normally your body, when it gets elevated estrogen levels, it sends them over to the liver. The liver conjugates them with something called glucuronic acid. They're excreted through the bile, which is secreted by the liver into the gallbladder for digesting fats. But anyways, the glucuronic acid conjugation of the estrogen makes us defecated out of our bodies. But when you've got the bad gut bacteria from eating meat and processed food and oils and not eating enough plant foods and fiber, then these bad bacteria, they have this enzyme glucuronidase, which the good gut bacteria do not have in significant amounts, and they will cut the cleavage bond between the estrogen and its conjugate with the glucuronic acid. And this will cause the estrogen now to be reabsorbed in your body and give you higher estrogen levels. Also, when you eat a lot of meats, they've given the animal estrogenic chemicals because it's a fat storage hormone to get the animal to become fat faster, to get it to market faster. So, you know, you look at a lot of people who drink tap water. There's tons of estrogens in tap water, and who eat meat, processed food. They'll have a lot more estrogenic chemicals circulating through their body, and they'll have an increased risk of breast cancer, an increased risk of uterus cancer, an increased risk of uterine fibroids. That's a benign tumor of the uterus. And in men, the sort of uterus equivalent is the prostate. So men who eat a lot of this stuff will have big prostates, which are a nuisance for them, okay? All right, now we're going to go through this stuff in a little more detail. How do you increase testosterone? Well, first of all, you want to be slim. You want to have a low body fat percentage because body fat will contain the enzyme aromatase, which converts testosterone into estrogen. So by being slim, you avoid that. And how do you stay slim? Eat a low fat, low sodium, low protein, 100% vegan diet, no oils, okay? The lower the percentage of calories from fat, the skinnier the population will be. So there's a lot of foods real low in fat. White rice, 1% of calories from fat. Potatoes, 1%. Sweet potatoes, 1%. Lentils, only 3% of calories from fat. The highest fat thing I would ever eat would be like oatmeal, around 15% of fat. Quinoa is something similar. Okay, you got to filter your water with a minimum. You got to have a carbon filter, even better, reverse osmosis filter. Get all those estrogenics out of there. You know, you can get the aluminum and the fluoride out with reverse osmosis. You don't want to be drinking plastic water because the plastic will contain bisphenol A or phthalates or both, or some BPA equivalent. Fluoride's also toxic. It's toxic to your gut lining. You want to avoid that. You don't want to be using nonstick cookware. You're minimizing your personal care products. Like, you don't want to be rubbing stuff on yourself. You don't want to be using sunscreen, moisturizers, colognes. You don't even really need shampoo. I don't use shampoo. And I know I don't have that much hair, but for most people, they can get by with just water, okay? If you need a shampoo, use the simplest one. Even baby shampoos will usually have 2 or 3 estrogenics in them. For soap, you know, just put soap on your hands. You don't need soap on the rest of your body unless you work on an oil rig or something. Okay, just get a transparent, hypoallergenic, the fewest ingredients possible. Don't eat foods like soy and flax. They're the most estrogenic. Don't eat anything with aluminum. Don't put your food in aluminum foil. Don't let your food contact on an aluminum container. You don't ever want to eat soy, and you don't ever want to eat, you know, especially non-organic. They'll spray it with glyphosate, which is estrogenic, or corn that's non-organic. They'll spray it with atrazine, which is super estrogenic. And it doesn't have to just be soy. On non-organic food, glyphosate is sprayed on 70 different foods. Atrazine is the one that turns a male frog into a female frog, so you really want to avoid that stuff. That's sprayed on the non-organic corn. You want to exercise. Good to do weightlifting, also good to do aerobics. With your aerobics, good to do some high-intensity interval training and some sprints. That also improves your physical appearance, improves your self-esteem, and it increases your sleep drive. So when you sleep better, you'll have higher testosterone levels. Real important to get adequate sleep to improve testosterone levels. When you're stressed out, your testosterone levels drop. You want to avoid unnecessary stress. So whatever it takes to avoid unnecessary stress, do that. Avoid caffeine because it's really the same as increasing stress. It elevates cortisol and catecholamines, okay? So you don't want that. Try being around women a few times a week. Just being around women, you know, we can't help liking them. And you can't help it. Your mind's going to drift to the thoughts of making the two-bag beast with them. It's just a fact, okay? You're human. And we like them more than they like us. You know the old joke, you know, why do men have jobs and women have Virginia? So they'll talk to each other. And, you know, I'm kind of kidding there. And also, as far as seeing women, just seeing women, you know, is good for the male brain, you know. Just type into your YouTube channel, female Olympic athlete, and I will bet you they'll show up a woman, a pretty female athlete with her shorts half up her butt. You ever notice that, how almost all the female athletes, the pictures from behind with the shorts half up their butt? You know. Anyways, read about history. And what you'll see is that modern men are a bunch of feminized wimps in comparison with men of the past. You won't even believe it if you actually know a little history. Men are so much more aggressive historically than they are nowadays. And that's because of like the fluoride and the aluminum in the water and all the estrogenic chemicals that are intentionally left into the water to dumb them down, to weaken them and to feminize them, to prepare them for collapse and slavery. Okay, if you just watch TV in the United States, like when I was growing up, I'm an old man, 63 years old, okay? 40, 50 years ago when I was a kid growing up, there's all these macho men, Gary Cooper, John Wayne, Charlton Heston, Sean Connery, Chuck Connors, Clint Eastwood, Mel Gibson, Sylvester Stallone. I mean, that was just normal to watch all that stuff. And nowadays, and I've seen this is like what United States did to Japan when we conquered them. We stopped letting them watch military movies, macho man movies, samurai warrior movies, and it's like in America. Instead of seeing all these macho men on the TV like I did when I was a young guy, nowadays you turn on the TV, you see Family Guy, some fat, stupid, wimpy man. You see Homer Simpson, the idea that the father figure is not like noble masculinity. Instead, he's, stupid wimp. And I can also tell you, when I was a kid, there was a TV show called Father Knows Best. Nowadays, they wouldn't allow that title. They try to feminize everything, and that's not for the betterment of the country. Okay, don't be promiscuous and avoid sleazy women, because a lot of women have venereal disease, and if you get a venereal disease, it can spread retrograde, like through the vas deferens into your testicles, and it can flame up your testicle. That's called orchitis. And the connector to the testicles is called the epididymis, and you can get epididymal orchitis. And the relevance is that can damage your testicles. I've seen a lot of guys that have decreased blood flow in their testicles, looking at their ultrasounds of their scrotums because they've had sexually transmitted diseases. So if you think you got a sexually transmitted disease, an STD, go to your doctor right away, get your antibiotics for it, and then be more careful next time. Okay, and those antibiotics can be kind of toxic too, so get it treated, but be careful, because even if you treat with antibiotics, the antibiotics themselves can be toxic. The fluoroquinolones, for example, and some of the other ones. Okay, so avoid sleazy women. A lot of modern women are very sleazy and promiscuous, and basically they're of very low value. Because as a man, you want proof of paternity if you're going to get involved in a long-term relationship. And if a woman is promiscuous, you're never going to have proof of paternity. So you should basically never have anything to do with her. That's important to know. Let's see, what else? That's like one of the most important things. Like, when the man and the woman date each other, the woman is thinking different things than the man. She's thinking, can he support me financially? Will he raise my status level? Can he give me a job? What can he do to help me? Okay, if I'm going to make the two-bag beast with him, what can he do for me? Whereas the man's thinking, do I really want to make the two-bag beast with her? Does she look like a whore? Does she look like she's got venereal disease? Is she crazy? Is she annoying? Does she dress like a sleaze? Does she have tattoos? Maybe indicate she's got hepatitis or something. Is she pierce, her face or anything like that, suggesting she's crazy? Things like that is what the guys think. Okay, so stay away from sleazy women. Even if you wear a condom, you strap the Bozak with a Jimmy hat, it doesn't mean you can't still get a venereal disease. You can get venereal disease through those, okay? You can get injury to your own penis through those if they're too tight, okay? They can have holes in them. They don't work as well as people think they do. If you're single, that raises a man's testosterone, because then he's sort of competing to try to find a new woman, so he's more motivated to stay physically in shape. The classic story is Pete Sampras. After he got married, he didn't play tennis as well. He's like one of the greatest tennis players of all time, and people tease him just because of being married. He didn't like that, but it's true. So be a little careful about that. Some urologists will say that all herbals are bogus, and I don't have any familiar with the herbals, but the urologist is going to be biased, okay? Some say fenugreek helps. I don't know. Some people say ashwagandha. I don't know. Some people say zinc supplements. I don't know of any of that stuff. I've never used any of those things, nor do I have any personal experience prescribing them or anything, but those are things people talk about. Pharmaceutical testosterone will work, but the problem with any pharmaceutical medication of testosterone is it'll suppress your intrinsic production. And then what if you have an allergic reaction or you can't afford the testosterone? Then your intrinsic testicles, who knows how long that's going to take to come back if it ever fully does. So I would not take testosterone supplement replacement unless you had no other choice. excessive. We talked about stress. Okay, we talked about that. Testicular trauma. Yeah, you don't want to do anything with testicular trauma. That can also injure your testicles, infarct the testicle. You can get intratesticular hematoma that can cause a localized infarction, partial infarction of a testicle. Stay away from alcohol. You get whiskey dick. Stay away from things that cause hypertension and diabetes, high-fat diets. Okay, high sodium diets, processed food. Varicocele, you can get that from being constipated, increased back pressure from abdominal pressure syndrome, pushing down to the veins of the scrotum. Dilated veins in the scrotum can heat up the testicle, okay, and then decrease its sperm testosterone production. Don't put your cell phone in your front pocket, okay? Your EMS, a low-power microwave transmitter, your microwave in your balls. Oh, as far as reading history, I got, look at my new tie here. I got my Celtic cross on an Irish tricolor flag here, okay? So you learn about the history of what these guys went through in the past, man. They had to be a lot tougher. Read about the ancient Romans. Read about Julius Caesar, okay? Read about Alexander the Great. After you read about those guys, you're just like, wow, I need to up my game and not be such a wuss, okay? Because you'll just see, nowadays it's very different when I look at young men compared to like when I was a young guy. When I was a young guy, it was cool to be tough, to be a wrestler, to be a football player, something like that. Whereas nowadays I see all these young men wearing bracelets and having earrings. You couldn't do that when I was young. People would start making fun of you. They would mock you and call you names. You couldn't do it. Men did not act so feminine like they do now. And now they'll do weird little things with their hair. And like I said, it wasn't like that when I was young. I can't think of anybody I know, guys wearing bracelets and earrings. No guy was doing that. They would say things like there was some movie, you're either a steer or you're queer or something. You would get made fun of. You would be pushed around. You would be bullied. You wouldn't be allowed to dress or look like that without getting bullied, okay? It's just a fact. There's no comparison. Men are much, much, much more feminized now than they ever were before in my lifetime, certainly, and from what I've read historically. Okay, let's see, what else? Some people like saunas. I don't really like them because I'm afraid you're going to fry your balls. Certainly if you stay in there a long time, you put the temperature too high. Don't put your laptop computer on your lap. You're sitting there microwaving your balls. Don't stand next to the microwave if you put your food in it. Better yet, don't even use those things. I've seen young guys going to the gym lifting weights and they put their cell phone in their front pocket. I'm like, don't you think that's counterproductive? You're trying to raise your muscle mass while you're microwaving your balls, you dumbass. Okay, let's see. Excess iron, well, that's kind of a more rare situation. We talked about soy and atrazine and corn being all bad things. Just keeping your food away from aluminum. Don't be rubbing estrogen on your private parts. Because if you're going to spank the monkey, don't be spanking the monkey with some type of lotion or something. Those things usually have 2 or 3 estrogens in them. Do it dry if you have to spank the monkey, okay? Every parent knows a boy, when they hit puberty, they start taking longer showers. Okay, we talked about, the meat changing the gut flora, having estrogens added to it. If you're eating oats and they're stale, they can have this estrogenic chemical called zeah. Dairy, they now have the cows pregnant with high estrogen levels, so stay away from dairy. I recommend avoid it completely. Traumatic brain injury can injure the pituitary, and that can lead to hypogonadism. Testicular torsion, that's a rare condition. Klinefelter, that's a rare condition. Anthony J, Dr. Anthony J is his YouTube channel. He's got some good videos on testosterone, but he doesn't know what he's talking about for nutrition. He's an ignoramus on that. But he's good. I like him. His book on estrogen was the best book on estrogen. It was called Estrogen Generation, Estrogeneration. Okay, stay away from sunscreens. In general, you don't want to rub any lotion on yourself. Okay, and what did Rodney Dangerfield say? There's a fine line between rubbing yourself between rubbing lotion on yourself or rubbing yourself with lotion. Okay, I messed up the joke. But yeah, forget about all these lotions and skin creams. They're all got estrogens in them. Why do so many women have high estrogens? Well, for the same reasons we just talked about. Here's some less known things that can, stay away from marijuana, Mary Jane. Stay away from lavender, tea tree oils, these food dyes. Stay away from them. They can be estrogenic. I told you that flax and soy are like hundreds and thousands of times more estrogenic than any other foods. Let's see, what else did we maybe not cover? Like if you do your cooking with just water, then you don't need to, and you don't use oil, then you don't need dishwasher detergent. That's estrogenic. You don't need laundry detergent. That's estrogenic. Unless you work on an oil rig or some really, job that gets things really dirty, you don't need laundry detergent. Just run your laundry a little hotter, okay? And don't put those anti-wrinkle things in there. Those are estrogenic as well. Avoid all plastics. Like I said, never put your food on aluminum foil or an aluminum container. Store water or other food in a glass container. If you got a new car, let it outgas a little bit. Don't sniff the car seats. They're estrogenic, the plastics. Let's see. And I think that's all I got for now. So, hope you found that helpful.